Good evening. It's Monday, the 22nd of July in some places of the world. This is the Monday evening Wi-Fi coffee connection. And off of the back of a conversation that we've just been having, we decided to hit the record button on what happens when the external locus of control is so large in your current context that it overwhelms the internal locus of control. So to put that into perspective, we all go about our day-to-day businesses, and some people are more inclined to believe that everything they do and achieve in their lives is solely down to them. Other people work on this premise that God, the government, their parents, somebody from high school, whatever, is responsible for their problems. One is an extreme example of the external locus of control. The other, the first one, is an example of the internal locus of control. So here we are in the world in which we all currently live, at least the sort of northwestern section of it, facing all manner of things. Governments in crisis, massive amounts of debt, and it looks, from what we were just saying, like we are all facing a period where the external factors are bigger than we can necessarily influence ourselves. So with that in mind, Marcella, your reflections.
Sometimes it can be very difficult to grasp what's going on externally. But if you don't look at the huge big picture of the things that you have no control over, and you concentrate on the things you do have control over, that relates to that vast, big external stuff, the external stuff that's going on that you can't control, it'll help you to deal with it better. You understand what I'm saying? That we have control over ourselves. So if we focus on what we can do and not necessarily what's going on around the world and the big stuff that's going on, the control that other people have that you don't have any control of, it'll make matters better, and you can better live with that.
Is there an element of acceptance or surrender in that?
It's a little bit of both, the acceptance of the things that you can't really control, but the acceptance also of the things that you can control. How can you make your life better despite what's going on around? And what was the other one you said? You said the
Acceptance and surrender.
and surrender. Said both. So maybe a little bit of surrender in there, and that I wouldn't say surrender. Maybe like it's more like a compromise. So this is going on. What can I do in my life to make it bearable? What can I do? Because I mean, it's up to us. We have the choices concerning ourselves. So what can I do to make it better?
Andy.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, sometimes things are way beyond our control, whether that's governmental or society-wise. The only thing we can do is kind of like Marcella said, see the opportunities that we have to deal with the situation in our little way, and that. So I've got to look at myself. Okay, and given the parameter that we're within, I'm not going to surrender. I'm going to decide how I'm going to move forward in my little ways, and maybe look for some other people that are are looking to do something similar, but do something rather than just talking about it, so that perhaps 2 or 3 of us can get together and do something, whether that's from a financial standpoint or from a societal standpoint, that we can make our own little movement.
I guess historically, community would have been key to that, and families. So I can see how in modern circumstances we might look to re-engage with community and to see what support there is in the family. I'm thinking back to images I saw as a schoolboy of, you know, the Great Depression and then the Dust Bowl period, particularly in American history. And my question is, can we make that much of a difference, even if we band together?
You know, I'm sitting here thinking about your first question, right? And for me, like Marcella said, you know, when we look at the big picture, right, and all of the stuff that's outside of my own center of control, the bigger things, like going worldwide kind of things that me individually, I really cannot affect by myself, right? I mean, the things I can do, I can throw a temper tantrum, I can get really upset, I can complain, I can do that, but I can also choose to accept it, which doesn't mean that I'm okay with it, but it means that I'm choosing to not suffer because of it, right? So that's what acceptance means to me. It's not so much saying I accept this and this is fine. It's I accept it because I can't do anything about it, but I don't have to suffer because of it. So when it comes to the bigger things, I'm aware, and I get frustrated a tiny bit until I pull myself back in and say, I can't do anything about this. So I have to now choose how I want to respond to it. And then I get further into my own, what can I control, right? What can I do? It's just how I choose to go through it, the decisions that I'm making about getting myself in a different position to control the way that my life is going. So I am aware, I react maybe sometimes to it, and then eventually get to a point where I'm like, can't do anything about this. This is not anything that I can directly change on my own right now in any way. So I have to look more closely to my life, the way it's operating, and the things that I can do about that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that comes into that, you know, Eckhart Tolle and the whole power of now. You know, Andy just dropped in the chat Viktor Frankl, and for those who maybe aren't informed or aware, Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who went to no less than 3 of the Nazi concentration camps during the time that he was imprisoned. And he said that the way we respond to any given circumstance is the one thing that can never be taken from us, no matter how hard or horrendous the circumstances. And you don't need me to spell it out in graphic portrait images. He experienced some hellish stuff. So if a guy like that is going to turn around and say, there is nothing that can take your ability to respond to the situation you are in away from you, it kind of encapsulates what you and Marcella have just said. It also brings in something that Andy was saying, that even within the confines of those concentration camps, there's that ability to connect from a place of humanity and try to support. Any thoughts, anyone?
Yeah, we don't have to be perfect, and I'm sure Viktor Frankl probably wasn't even perfect himself. You know, we don't have to be perfect in our response, but it gives us an opportunity. The problem gives us the opportunity to, and most of us have not had to go through what people like Viktor Frankl and others have gone through, which is maybe even worse, I don't know. But any kind of discomfort that we have, it gives us an opportunity to level up and go to the next level. Easy for me to sit here, no issues, no food issues or anything like that, but it is the opportunity. And I think we often miss, and this is where I can speak to it, we often miss sometimes that some of those things that we think are out of our locus of control are not. And that's, you know, to be honest with me, it's been, for much of my life, I thought a lot of my issues were out of my locus control. I was born that way. That's the way I was. And guess what? When it really came down to it, and it was really, really, really tough, I had no other choice but to stand up and be courageous. And then I found out that there's a lot more within my locus of control than I thought there was.
You know, we don't get to test our resilience without having adversity introduced. So we can all think that we might react or respond in a certain way in certain circumstances. Unless you've actually experienced it and you're talking from that life and lived experience, we can't be sure. And resilience, even in itself, is something that alters and grows or changes over the course of a life. Things that one of us may have been able to tolerate in our 20s and 30s is probably going to be tougher for us than it would be in our 50s and 60s, which would also go hand in hand with, and I want to thank you, Andy, for the nod. You know, Viktor Frankl is not the only person in the world who has suffered through inhumanities and come out with something powerful for the rest of us to learn from. So thinking about current circumstances, not necessarily personal ones, but where we all find ourselves currently, what aspects of resilience are we able to see being tested or even grown through the current adversities that we're facing? I'm going to jump on Brett to start that one.
Why would you go and do that now?
Sitting peacefully in the background.
I'm observing, finding my peace in my way through this. Yeah, I know I play a role in the path that I walk, right? I know there's a role that I play there. I think there's a part of the challenge of getting through my own beliefs, some self-beliefs and some other parts that I guess harbor or have in myself that can actually set me free to moving forward. I feel like I'm getting off the question, but kind of around the topic.
If you go too far, we'll do one of those. What is it your judges say? I'll give you some leniency here, Mr. Corcoran, but try and get back to the point.
And what was the question? Let's be clear on the question now, so I can get back on the point.
You're making me laugh. How are your current circumstances giving you opportunity through these adversities you're facing to see where your current personal growth is?
Well, it's definitely allowing my stuff to come up, boil up, and see where I stand in the choices that I do have and how I want to walk through this point. At this point, I am taking a breath, if you want to call it that, and taking the time to sit and be in my feelings and kind of process where I am and where I want to go. Yeah. I kind of hand it off to somebody else. If I get a hit on going further,
Yeah,
I'll
order in the courtroom. You're out of order, Mr. Corcoran. Take a seat. I'm only teasing. Erika, you used to be a courtroom reporter. You've heard all this sorts of
I
things.
did.
Before.
He'd be in contempt right now because he's ignoring your question. But anyway, for me, personally, in the situation that I'm currently in and what I'm dealing with, perseverance and determination are things that are coming forward for me in building my resilience to the adversity that I'm facing, right? So I could choose to act very hastily and decide I'm done and just walk out with any clear, well-formed decision making in place. I'm not choosing to do that because I don't think that it would put me in a good situation. So I am choosing to persevere and to stay determined with my end goal in sight and keep working towards that. Patience seems to be coming to the forefront of for me, which impatience is not one of my virtues. So this is being tested in a big way for me.
Ironically, you touch on a point there that is, by exercising your internal locus of control and believing that all things happen through you, you could put yourself squarely in front of a massive, big, heavy moving thing of the current external locuses, or at least the influences of the external locuses, I should probably say. So Brett just mentioned having a bit of a hiatus. You are talking about practicing patience and there being purpose in patience. Andy, Marcella, thoughts?
Yes. What I heard you say, Erika, quite a few times is I choose to. And I think that choosing to, well, first it's your thought process, but then second, it's your choice, choosing to do. And I think that that is, I can't think of the word I want to use, but choosing to is the foundation of accepting whatever's going on outside your control and bringing it back to you, bringing it back to me. And what was your question? Because I know that through the stuff that I'm dealing with, that I had a choice, either to stay in the bed and cry all the time or to get up and do the things that I know I would like to do and need to do regardless of what's going on. So it's a choice. And in that choice comes resilient, because resilient, right? The definition is bouncing back, and preferably bouncing back quicker than wallowing in whatever you're going through. And so it's a choice to be resilient, and it's a choice to learn from what's happened in the past. And I think that you take back the power from external things that's going on when you choose to.
Perfectly wrapping our response, not being able to take it away from us, up with the question, which for those who've forgotten was, how is the current adversity giving us opportunities to measure our growth? And you answered that admirably. So Brett alluded to the fact that we are the architects of our experiences. Anybody that's read the 4 Agreements will also be familiar with that. Andy, you hadn't commented on your growth, but I wanted to come to you anyway because I can almost hear our friend Jonathan Frost shouting at us all and saying, get used to having less. And you'd mentioned in the chat expectations and gratefulness. So first of all, how are you growing in adversity? And then if you'd like to speak to getting comfortable with less.
Yeah, I think the adversity is real adversity has really challenged me, and without it, there's no way I would have been growing. It was just too comfortable, and it really got me out of my comfort zone. And so you have to, well, you have to make a decision. Am I going to just give in, or am I going to stand up? So, and then one of the things that I remember someone giving me that phrase once, and it wasn't just at me, it was at a bunch of teachers, and it was about gratefulness. I forget, there's a little phrase that goes with gratefulness, but even at the time when I was hearing that, I was like, yeah, but I was but because I was expecting everything to be handed on a plate, and so we've got to manage our expectations. And one of the best ways to start managing them is to begin by being grateful, and to really understand what that means, and to ask other people what it means. And I know at Thanksgiving in the US, everyone kind of gets around the dinner table and they express what they're grateful for. And I remember when I was quite young going to that, and I thought, this is all, you know what. But if it's really truly coming from the heart, and it's something that happens on a daily basis, we've really got to be thankful every morning we wake up. I remember seeing a little thing somewhere, I can't remember what it was, and it was this guy was saying, okay, I'm going to give you to $10 million tomorrow. Are you happy? Yeah, I'm happy. But there is one proviso. And what's that? Well, the next day you're not going to wake up. And they're like, we don't want the money anymore. And so we need to find, there's so much to be grateful for, and it's a change of mindset. And so we've got to think about the expectations, and we've got to be focused on being grateful. And it's easy to say, but you've actually got to work at that. It doesn't just happen. So
I just want to say something about what you said about getting comfortable with having less. And I was starting to laugh because this is something that I've said before, and I'll say it again. I'm at this point where I don't want less. That's just it, right? This is part of my decision-making process too, right? Like I could very easily make the decision I have to make and put myself in a position where I will have less, like just by way of that decision. I'm not okay with that. Like I've worked really hard to get where I am, and I'm certainly not willing or wanting to go backwards. I'm looking to go forward and above and beyond. So getting comfortable with having less is not an option for me. So it's the big girl decision to make. Well, if you don't want to have less and you want more and all of it, then you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable with where you are until you're ready to make that change so that you can have everything you want. Because I'm not personally, me, willing to accept less than what I know I want. So I just needed to say that because that's come to me too. Like, well, it's very easy to like simplify and minimize, and you don't need that and you don't need that. And this is not about needing, it's about wanting and creating a life that I'm happy to live without sacrificing anything that I enjoy.
Probably Jonathan would be saying this is about a sustainability decision as opposed to a like personal goals and aspirations. And probably is slightly off of the topic that we're on. So I'm going to redirect us slightly, and something that came up something that I followed the other day was about gratitude, and not detracting or going against what you just said, Andy. There is an element that we bypass tough stuff because it's like, something crappy happened to me, I'll go and journal my gratitudes and that'll make it better. What we need is a context, our personal context and container, where we can recognize what just happened to us, the kind of righteous indignation of that thing, and have the broadness of context within our containers, our personal containers, to not have to have the bypass. And we can say, yeah, do you know what? I'm a big enough person. I have enough life experience. I've done enough of the work that I can recognize that that was a truly shitty hand I just got dealt. But you know what? This is my response. This is what I choose to bring to that. So I guess we're still talking about our responses. But what I want us to think about now is how we create a larger container in our lives so that we don't necessarily get tricked into bypassing the tough stuff. So I'm going to go to Marcella.
When you asked the question, the first thing I thought about is the question previously about resilience. And it also reminded me of a friend who, she does not want to hear, like I'm what they call the half full kind of person. So I'm always looking at the good in everything. And that really gets on her nerves because she really wants to sit in whatever it is for a while and then she'll move out. The resilience part, though, I think is what makes our container bigger, is when we go through things, because you mentioned this too, when you go through things and you deal with them and you make the right choices, your container gets bigger and your resilience and patience and perseverance get stronger, and your container gets bigger, and then other stuff will come up. And I'm sure all of us could relate to this, how something very similar happened to you again, but your reaction, your response was different. And it's like, oh, I know I do. I'm like, oh, look at that. I didn't get angry. I didn't get upset. I was even, and I even helped, wherein at one time I would be so angry and argumentative and, on and on and on. And so that's when those things happen like that, you can tell that your container is getting bigger.
Thanks, Marcella. Anybody else? Erika, you were chuckling at one point.
Well, I mean, I could go off on this topic, but I am not a huge fan of the positivity bypass or of the, toxic positivity. Everything has to be rainbows and unicorns and, the negative, messy, emotion phobic culture that we live in. So emotions are emotions. They don't need to be good or bad. They are what they are. And we should be allowed to feel unjudged in speaking what they are authentically, right? Like sometimes, and Marcel, I'm thinking of your friend, right? Like applying it to me. When I am pissed off, I want to be allowed to be pissed off without somebody telling me, be grateful that you have whatever, right? I don't need to hear that in this present moment. What I need is to be validated and heard that I have a right, that you can understand why I might be angry until that anger wants to pass. And then I'll be allowed to look at things from a different perspective. And I think we won't be able to create safe containers like that until we allow people to do that effectively, right? Because the less we allow people to exist in their feelings, they will keep staying in those feelings and will never learn how to get to the next step, right? Because they're going to keep looking for that validation and affirmation to why they feel the way that they feel. So I'm all about the messiness of all of that. I don't like rainbows and unicorns don't always have to exist. It can be shit and shit, and we can just let it be shit until it's not shit anymore, and then it could be rainbows and unicorns, right? Like, let's just feel it until we feel something else, and then we can move on. And we can't make good, well-informed decisions unless we allow that to go, because it's always going to exist until we allow it to do its thing and go on its way.
I don't feel like I answered the question. I talked about my friend, but I do, when you were talking, Erika, it made me realize that I didn't really answer the question of when you go through, do you kind of like sugarcoat it, right? Sugarcoat it with the gratitude. Or like, if you break your foot and say, well, at least you still have a foot, kind of thing, doesn't work. So you have to, what Erika said, you have to really sit in it but then not sit in it long. I don't think you should sit in it long, but feel the feeling and then move on, and not sugarcoat it.
Thank you. And the reason I'm smiling is because I was thinking about your friend and what you said, and how sometimes people who are extremely optimistic can be grating on those that are there feeling the thing. But the reason your container is half full is because you've grown it. Whereas, it's refillable on account of the fact of its larger size, which you have created through experience and perseverance. We would like to call Mr. Corcoran again if he feels that he has something to share. But if he doesn't, it's a non-binary courtroom. You cannot be guilty or not guilty. You can be a bit of both, whatever floats you.
I'm feeling into the conversation and just seeing where I want to go. And there's so many different avenues, and I feel like I'm getting pulled off topic. And that's where I'm like, well, I don't want to be off topic. So I'm trying to, I got my own stuff going on here, right? So it's for me today, and here's the off topic piece, right? Today was one of those days that no matter what I did, I felt like I got nothing done. And I feel like I'm getting nothing done here. Like I'm following the conversation, I'm understanding what everybody's saying, but I'm not processing a certain piece that I need to process. And it could be because it's right in my wheelhouse. And it's probably something that I really need to pay attention to so I can gain what it is that I need from the conversation. So I'm kind of in it and just listening and following where you guys are, because there's something about it that I'm missing, because when I do answer, I go off topic, right? So it's like, all right, so what's up with that? I'm just kind of taking my own inventory on where I am and what's going on for me. So I will say that. How's that?
Perfect. And hopefully the conversation's having as much impact on our listener. Andy, anything for you?
No, it's I think this is where it's really important with whatever you've got going on, to to try to be honest with yourself, and look at what you do have control over, and not give your power away to what is beyond your control. So, and it doesn't have to be about intelligence. It doesn't have to be about anything. Resources help. So, but being resourceful is even better. So that's, whenever we come across these crossroads and or, outside influences that are huge, yeah, we've got to be really resourceful, resilient, resourceful, all that kind of stuff. But you've got to do it. You've got to sit down. You got to think about it. You got to go away. You got to share it, and then you've got to make a plan and some tough decisions and plan. And then you go for it. Then you go 100%.
Thank you. Nicely contemplative and reflective, which probably sets the tone for the rest of us. So, Marcella, closing thought or comment from you?
I really enjoyed our time together and the overall concept of locus of control, because this world is crazy, and if we concentrate on what's going on in the world, we'll go crazy. And so the fact that we had this conversation and we all have an internal locus of control and we all have choices, and that's how we take our power back, by choosing what's right for us or me, not for you, but for me. And that's, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Erika.
So I'm thinking about what Marcella just said, right? About the craziness that's going on in the world and how I don't really like to, get too involved with all of the bigger, greater things. Like, I'm aware of it. I like to be aware, just surfacely aware of what's going on in the world, so that I'm not obtuse and walking around clueless about what's happening. But I don't really need to know all the ins and outs and get like down and dirty with it, because it clutters my ability to attend to my own life, right? Because it can cause anxiety, it causes anger, it causes fear, frustration, all of those things that, while they're okay to feel, I don't want to feel them about things that I have no control over. So I'd rather reserve my energy feeling shitty about my own life and things that I can control if I'm going to feel shitty, right? So I'm not too obsessive about what I can't control in the greater good. I'm all about taking your power back, though, and recognizing when you're giving up your power by letting things disrupt you and pull you off and react and behave in a way that isn't really in line with who you are truly. And I will just say, anything that you're not changing, you're choosing, right? So everything is a choice always. And if you're okay with the choices that you're making, even if you're remaining in a place where it doesn't work for you, that's okay too, as long as you're cognizant that it's a choice that you're making.
Very nice. Thank you. Brett, with no pressure either way, do you have a closing thought?
Closing thought is, I'm glad I was here so I can observe what was going on and within myself and what you guys are sharing, because there's a piece for me that I'm still processing. So what everybody's saying, I'm taking in, but what was it that I had such a hard time to input? So I'm looking at that piece and what is that? And there's something there for me. So I'll be watching this again to see where those pieces are and from a different perspective. So Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And I know Erika will be cross with me if I don't add my own closing thought. And what I saw, having been part of the conversation before we hit record, and then the conversation that went on in here, was a change from the energy, if I can use that term, of the collective conversation when we were just chewing the fat, as we say in the UK, to a whole bunch of people, even if they're not sure exactly how they're doing it, being empowered. So what it shows me is that if you're just chewing the fat with your friends in a conversation, these things can seem overwhelming. But when you're approaching them from a wise mind, from a place of maturity and character, then our natural inclination, everybody in this room, is to tackle whatever these things are on our own terms, which makes me comfortable that at this moment in this room, our locuses of control all sit quite firmly with us. So thank you for sharing in this conversation. We will see you, or you might hear us, in another one in the not too distant future. Cheerio.